explain the story to him. I give him the picture of my senior pastor. I write my phone number on the back. I go to Dallas Fort Worth Airport, take a plane back to Ohio, back to Michigan, and go through Sunday, which is terrible. Finally, on Monday morning, about 10 o'clock, I get a phone call from this guy. He's whispering on the phone. And so I started whispering to him. So we're talking, and he says, he's in my office, and I got here. What do you want me to do with him? I said, well, just tell him that you're going to send him some money and get an address. God will forgive you. I promise you. God will forgive you. So he calls me back a little bit later. He's got an address. He gives me an address. I get the car, drive to Detroit, buy another plane ticket, go to Dallas, get a rental car, take a friend with me, walk up to the house, knock on the door, and this woman, this single mom, comes to the door and screams. She knew me well. My senior pastor comes out of the back part of the place. We put him in the car. He comes in the car. We go to the park, talk for 3.5 hours. He's not coming back to his family. We take him home. We get in the car. I break down and just start sobbing. And my friend drives us back to the Dallas Fort Worth Airport. And we pull into the airport. I look over at him and I say, Paul, when we get home, I'm going back to graduate school, and I'm going to figure out why pastors do this. Because I've only worked for 2 of them, and both of them ran off with other women in the church. Okay? Now, that was 35 years ago, and you're going to walk out of here today knowing more about adultery than you ever thought possible. Okay? And that's what I'm going to talk about. And the first part of it was spent on trying to recover from it. The last half of my life has been spent on how to protect people. Okay? After I got out of grad school 10 years later, I joined a research team, and we spent 10 years identifying and working with 4,000 pastors over those 10 years using the CT and the leadership surveys. And in that process of looking at all that data, we came up with some very interesting situations and very interesting outcomes, some of which I didn't believe initially. And one of the things that came up that I didn't believe and I didn't like initially was 90, almost 89% of those pastors who admitted that they'd been sexually indiscreet while in ministry and married said that they were shocked it happened to them. They said they were blindsided. They felt bushwhacked, totally taken by surprise. Now, when I went to seminary, it was you busted the heads down, you ran through the boundaries, you ran all the red lights. You know, you were doing something deliberate, you were rebellious, your heart wasn't right with God. These guys said nothing like that. So, as we begin to talk about it, more and more we begin to think about along these lines. And the question is, there we go, is it possible for someone to be innocently and ignorantly prepared for adultery? Is that possible? The answer is a resounding yes. Okay? It is a resounding yes. Now, we're going to talk about those preparations today. And we're going to focus on first-time adulteries. First-time adulterous experiences, which seem to catch people totally by surprise. They seem out of the blue, out of left field. People are unprepared when it seems to happen to them. Now, when we talk about being swept off your feet and being bushwhacked and being surprised, it sounded to me very much like what I used to do in the clinical practice with my first clinical supervisor. He ran a 30-bed alcohol rehab program, inpatient program. And we would chart on that, those intake forms under the influence of a mood-altering substance. We didn't know what the substance was all the time, but we knew they were under the influence. And that is exactly what we began to figure out as we were working with these pastors. They're under the influence of a very powerful drug called infatuation. Every one of you have been infatuated or you would not have gotten married. Every one of you. You know what the feeling's like. People give up kingdoms when they're infatuated. They do stupid things like put on diapers and drive 3,000 miles to confront girlfriends down in Florida. Smart, intelligent, bright people do really crazy things when they're infatuated. So don't think you would do anything any different if you were infatuated. Now the issue is, how does infatuation develop? That's what I'm going to share with you today. How does it happen? Really practically speaking. So we're talking about people who are under the influence of a mood-altering substance, and it just explodes inside them all at once. It's been building up, and they collapse. They just go over like a feather. Just very suddenly. Totally shocked by what's happening. Now, this is not rocket science, but it's very interesting as we begin to think, where do these relationships come from? There are only three in nature. All first-time adulteries, now I use the word all very easily, all first-time adulteries come from just one of three sources. Here we go. The first one is a platonic friendship. Okay? A platonic friendship. Now, I was born late 40s. I grew up in the 60s. I was actually in New York when Woodstock took place. I wasn't at Woodstock, though. But the point is, I understand platonic friendship. Is it possible to have male and female friendships? No. Okay. Well, most people say yes, and I think there is. And what I'm going to share with you today, there is a fine distinction that everybody in here can tell between a friendship and an emotional affair. Now, the gal who edited the book that you're getting today, free at the Compliments of Moody Press, I did not pay for this. They sent it to me. She edited that book. Her name is Jenny. She's a Berkeley grad. And Jenny's a great friend. She's the communications director of our church. But this is the issue. Jenny and I are friends. Jenny does not change my mood when I see her. Okay? Jenny does not, when I get a text from Jenny, an email from you, I don't suddenly get excited. When I meet Jenny in the break room, and she happens to be getting a cup of coffee and I grab one, I don't have the tingles, as Gary Chapman says. Okay? She doesn't influence my mood at all. And the person you're having an emotional affair with, you will even call their cell phone just to hear their voice on the answering. Okay? You will look forward to the text messages. You will feel better automatically. You can come to work exhausted and suddenly feel revived when you get an email from this person. When you're in the midst of an emotional affair, it changes your mood. They are no longer friends. They are a drug, and you're under the influence. That's the distinction between an emotional affair and a friendship. And one of the things we're going to look at today is how these little platonic friendship webs come about. How do they happen? How do they occur? This isn't a seduction. This isn't where somebody's coming after you trying to get you into bed. If it was, you'd probably run. You'd be scared to death. But this is about a web of support that you can contribute to very easily. The second one is a dangerous partner profile. Everybody in this room, including myself and my wife, have a person who, not tall, dark, and handsome, but who brings to the situation a series of experiences that make them especially vulnerable to me. I actually had a woman stand on our church platform with me and said, I can tell you every unhappily married man in this auditorium. Okay? Because unhappily married people send out signals. And you can know it. You can just tell it. And she said, I would never go after after a happily married person, because they might reject me. And I've had way too much rejection in my life already. I only go after unhappily married people, where we can spend a little bit of pleasure with each other, even if it's just short term. So, we're going to talk about that dangerous partner profile. We'll not be able to cover all the differences. It's in the book. It's all explained. You can take a look at it a little later on. The third source of this is what we call old boyfriends and old girlfriends. You never even had this option 12 years ago. But you can be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You got this little baby. You finally got him to sleep. It took you all night. They've been sick. You're wired. You can't go back to sleep. And you sit down at the computer and say, I wonder whatever happened to Bill. And bingo. We have a little say in my deal. Because of the infatuation does not have to be cultivated in this last relationship. It's already there. If you stay in touch with an old boyfriend for 30 days, you will be confused about your marriage. If you stay in touch with them in another 30 days, you'll be sleeping. 0 to 60 is the time frame we talk about in the profession. 0 to 60. Why? Because the infatuation from adolescence is stored in your brain. You never forget the music, the artists, the dances, the boys you kissed, the dates you went on that were spectacular. You never forget that stuff.